You had a clip there, a bunch of comments from different parts of his speech there, but you mentioned it too. Part of those clips we just showed, the president talking about heritage, saying it in the context of monuments coming down. When he says heritage, you mentioned that word. You said that signals something. What do you say that word signals?
Well, he's talking about the Confederacy. He's essentially saying the people that tried to destroy the United States, the traitors, are the ones that we need to celebrate. That's the heritage that he is interested in. And to be so insulting is to say the only person that did more for African Americans was President Lincoln because he freed the people who were enslaved. It's so disrespectful. I mean, I don't even know what to say about it. It's racist. He knows it's racist, and he is using racism to try to win his election again. He did the exact same thing in 2018, except for 2018, it was the invasion from Central America. He's also talking about Asians with what he's trying to say about China bringing in the virus that he's refused to do anything about. But I know he doesn't care about African Americans or people of color, but he also doesn't even care about his own constituents. They could have done social distancing there. There was nobody in that stadium. They had plenty of room. If he cared about his own constituents, he would have done this virtually. But he doesn't mind exposing them for his own personal narcissistic gratification. It's really sad, and I'm counting the days. I think we have a little over 130 days before we relieve the world of this mess that we've experienced for the last 3.5 years.
We've talked a little bit here about some pretty significant changes we've seen in polling in the last couple of weeks, in particular in response to these protests, to where the national conversation has been. There's this one, for example, a majority of Americans, now 52%, say that they favor removing Confederate statues. This is from Quinnipiac, out just a couple of days ago. That is up, that 52% number, from just 39% 3 years ago in the wake of Charlottesville. However, we are also now seeing that some protesters are targeting non-Confederate statues. In Portland, Oregon, they toppled the statue of George Washington, as well as one of Thomas Jefferson. Congressman, I want to take this question in two parts with you. First, just on that movement in the polling. That poll from 3 years ago on Confederate monuments, that was taken in the wake of Charlottesville. That got certainly plenty of attention worldwide. At that point, 39%, 3 years later, an outright majority. What do you attribute that pretty significant and quick growth to?
Well, I tell you, I mean, it makes me feel so hopeful and so inspired, because I feel like we're at this moment in our country, probably similar to how it felt in the 1950s when the cameras, the news media revealed what was going on in the South. And I feel like we're in one of those moments of inflection in our country where we're actually maybe finally coming to grips with our history. You know, we have had a tendency as a country to only want to hear about the wonderful things of our history, George Washington and the cherry tree. We want the nice stories, but we don't want to hear the more difficult ones. And so I am very inspired by it, but I'm hoping that we'll go a little deeper, because people are using terms like systemic racism. And I know that so many people don't really know what those terms mean. And maybe now we can talk about it. You know, just dealing with the virus, the coronavirus, and the extreme disproportionate death rate. And people are finally learning about the underlying health conditions that African Americans and other communities of color face in the United States. And so I'm hoping that we'll be able to move the needle. And I'll tell you, if there's anything that's good that comes out of this presidency, even though the last 3.5 years have been so painful, maybe he has been so extreme that he actually moves the needle in the other direction, because I think most of Americans are ashamed by this. You know, the other poll that's drastically different is on policing, because, you know, a few years ago when they would poll white people and black people, white people would say there's no problem, there's no discrimination in policing, and black people, of course, would say the exact opposite. Well, the needle has moved with that as well, and people are much closer. So there's a real heightened awareness, but that's why we have to do our job here in Congress, and we have to pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, because it's a transformative piece of legislation that really meets what is being called for in the streets. And I just hope that people keep protesting every single day until we get this bill done.
I just want to ask you quickly, though, following up on that poll we showed there, the movement on the Confederate question, there is that news. We put it up there the last couple of days. Some protesters have gone after non-Confederates. I saw Ulysses Grant the other day, who was a champion of civil rights in the 1870s in this country. His statue was toppled by protesters somewhere. Is there a risk here that the toppling of these statues kind of clouds the issues you're trying to raise here?
Well, I mean, there's the potential for that. But what I really hope happens is a real discussion of our history. And I'm not sure toppling every statue is what we really need to do. But what we do need to do is we need to have an in-depth understanding and discussion of our history and not just the nice parts. And so hopefully that will be the outcome.